Okay, so the third time the charm broadcast is now live. Let's see if I can at least enable the. Huh. Ah, Antoine, good to see you.
You too, Professor. How you doing?
Good. So, what finally worked for you? Because I'm trying to figure out what the problem is. Did it just
I'm
show
sorry.
up?
Yeah, I had to install and figure out how to get on, and then I guess I was in another chat room waiting or something like that. So yeah, I had to mess around with it a little bit. Figure
Okay,
it out.
I'm going to go ahead and post that. Okay, so I've sent the link to the watch page for this to everyone. It looks like people are now at least finding the watch page for this session. Um, okay, so run down for me exactly what happened from it as best as you can, so I can try and use that to help other people. Because we had some issues like this last month, but it didn't seem to be as bad. They've changed something, and I'm not sure what exactly is the
You
problem
mean,
on Google's end.
in regards to the Hangout program?
Right.
Well, the first thing that happens is that it comes up with a when you're installing it, it comes up with a window that says that it's installing and that the video is going to pop up after installation. You're sitting there for about 10 minutes. You're like, okay, what happened? It has a little tag at the bottom says refresh here. So you click that, and nothing happened. And so I went to the download on the internet and hit the Google and Voice video setup, and then that's when it started doing its thing, and then I guess it um, opened up, sent me to my own class. I guess I was the only one sitting in there, and it said that it's waiting for other people to come. So I was sitting there for a little bit, and so then after I guess I went to my email to try to log back in through the email. So I hit the
Okay.
email button, and then it came up, and then it showed me in one area, and then it showed that Toph, Scott, Miles, Jen. It has a little green camera, and it shows that. It kind of shows like that in the right hand corner. So then I picked the green camera, and then you and I got connected. But before that, it was kind of like a process to get to that point, though.
Right, and that's the problem is that this should be relatively simple, but I'm not sure. At some point, it was much simpler than it is now. Um, but yeah, they've Google changed something, and it's like you said, it was just taking like it was supposed to be installing. It took like 10 minutes, and you had to go
Yeah.
and separately download an installer. Is that right?
It well, yeah. When you hit the link, it goes to an install page, and
Okay.
yeah, it looked. You know how it looks like it froze or something, or just sits there. It didn't
Uh-huh.
look like it was actively downloading, didn't show any loading bar or anything. And I'm trying to see if I can find the page.
Yeah, if you can find the page, I'll post that link.
Um, Maybe it's just the initial installation that does that.
And
Um,
yeah, and it looks like Michael hasn't joined us yet, but he says he saw the invite in Hangout on Air. So maybe he's installing right now.
hmm. Let's see.
Page. I'll post that link. Whoop.
There we go.
Hello,
Okay, Miles.
I'm here also.
Miles? Michael?
Miles, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the initial installation that does that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
think
looks
maybe
like
what Michael hasn't joined us yet, but he says he saw the invite in Hangout on Air. So Miles, you've got the video stream of the Hangout open another window, and because of lag, the audio is coming through. So make
Oh,
sure
okay.
that you don't have the watch video. Yeah. Make sure you
Okay.
don't have the watch window
I see.
open.
Yeah.
Close the
Which means the watch window.
Close the other one. So,
yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out exactly where this is all going turnip shaped. Um, did you have to go to Hangouts on Air to get the invite,
uh,
or
after I installed the program, I went to Video Hangouts, and then it shows you and whoever else is on air with you.
okay? So and it prompted you to install the software.
Yeah.
Um,
Honestly, I forget actually at what point that happened. So, uh,
because that seems to be this like crucial step that somehow isn't happening for people, or maybe it's just the software installation is taking too long, because it it took a while for Antoine. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could remember what I did to install that, but
to quiz people from last month, because I thought it was just a few isolated problems last month, and I know that some members of that class basically walked other people through it, but I didn't see the way they walked people through it, so it's deceptively easy from my end to create the Hangout, but we are
yeah,
clearly not having the success I'd like in terms of getting people
actually,
to be able to join. Yeah.
I think what I might have done was to, if you try and start a video
Okay.
hangout, then it'll ask you to install it, and then you can join other ones that are in progress.
Okay. I'll tell everyone to do that. If you can, anyone who's actually watching this, so go and try to create your own Hangout. That should prompt Google to install the software. That may be the magic trick in the whole thing. I may need to start telling people to go to create a Hangout sometime ahead of the first Hangout, just to get that software installed.
Yeah.
Not saying anything about needing to have software installed to receive an invite. I had been assuming that if you got an invite, it would say, "Oh, do you want to install the software?" But that's simply what the failure is.
Yeah.
Give a heads up on it at least.
Yes. Hello.
I'm still here.
What's up, Scott?
Hey, finally made it.
Okay, Scott, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Did you wind up having to try and create a Hangout before you were able to join this one?
No.
Okay.
I put Hangouts in the search bar in Google
Mhm.
Plus, and then I actually searched for your name, and then it brought me to your page, and then there was something on your page that allowed me to join this.
Okay,
I
well, in that
think
case, I'll
that's
send
what happened.
well, in that case, I will also make sure I post a link to my Google Plus page. That's easy enough. Okay. That'll work for everybody, because then you had to install software, right, Scott?
I'm sorry, I said I didn't have to install
You
anything.
didn't have to install anything? Okay. I think maybe then the software was... Had you joined any Google Hangouts before? Installed?
Well,
Maybe?
no, I've never done this.
Okay.
I'm on Google Plus, but I've never done a
So,
Hangout.
okay, so, what browser are you using? Are you using Chrome or
Safari.
Firefox or Safari? Safari? Okay.
Safari. Yeah.
So can Scott just put the icon on?
Right, Scott?
I'm sorry, I didn't have to install anything.
You didn't have to install anything? Okay. I think maybe... Okay, Michael, you're in now, but you're still streaming the video of the session. So make sure you close the window. That's the viewing window for the Hangout. I'm glad you're in now. Michael, I can see you, and I think I can hear you typing. Can you hear me? Can you see me and everyone else?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, good. So we need to stamp out whatever's been going wrong with these sessions. I've been polling people, and it seems that many people had to install software. Okay, I think, Mike, looks like you muted yourself. I'm assuming that's intentional for the moment.
I just don't like any random noises to interrupt people.
Okay, thank you. So, basically, several people have to install software, and the easiest way to trigger a software install is by trying to start a Google Hangout. And for Scott, what worked was basically going to my Google Plus page and he was able to see the invite there. So, Michael, what worked for you? I'm trying to make sure that we get this.
I did what I was able to see the video, but I couldn't make myself be seen. So I went to your Google Plus page and clicked on that. I just overheard the conversation. So.
Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to post that as a comment for anyone who's still just looking at the page for the second or third sessions. And I'll make sure in the future that I only send people links to my Google Plus page and not to the... I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what they changed and when they changed it, but I thought I'd gotten the kinks ironed out with using Google Hangout, and then more problems. More technology, more problems. So, okay. How's everyone doing? Anyone who's here right now, do you have any urgent questions about branching dialogue, Twine, games writing in general, or the class? Because we'll go in and we'll do some tutorial stuff for anyone who's, not able to actually share with us tonight. And looks like we will have to run over because it's 10:15 now and we're just getting started. But I want to make sure that I start by addressing any particular questions you folks have, unless, of course, they're questions you'd rather just ask one-on-one, in which case, you can arrange a phone conversation or something like that.
I have a question about the assignment,
Mm-hmm.
the 15 branch points. What exactly 15 branch points? What does that mean? Not what does it mean, but does that mean every...
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I've already decided that I need to add some new tutorial material on that. I'm also in the process right now of considering switching from Twine to another piece of software that does more or less the same thing. In Twine, each box, as you see in European Twine, is called a passage. The name passage is specific to Twine. A branch point is any time when the player of the game gets to make a decision. That means at least two choices, and they have to be meaningful choices. So if there's two links, but they go to the same next passage, then that isn't really a branch point. Okay. A branch point is wherever the narrative diverges.
Okay. So in other words, you should see 15 different choices that the player should be able to make in the upcoming assignment.
Right. Exactly. 15 choices.
Gotcha. All right.
And for this assignment, those should all be dialogue. The whole thing should be in conversation as much as possible.
That was another thing. Yeah, you said no scene changes or... anything like that. So it's all.
If you need to work in a little bit of action to make the whole thing flow, that's fine. But if you find that you want to give a series of actions as options, then you're probably trying to write something that will be best as active action-based gameplay into branching dialogue.
Okay.
So, anyone do you follow up on that, or anyone have a question related to that?
Not really. I don't have any.
Okay. So let me see. Got any questions or posts that have shown up on the page? No, not since I last checked. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show not a branching dialogue, but a sample of branching narrative gameplay built into Twine, as if the Twine was the entire game, which is one of the things you can do in Twine. It's just not one of the things that there's a huge market for in the industry, because your bigger budget games are going to tend to have action-based gameplay, and then when characters stop to talk, you go into branching dialogue. It depends on the game. Certainly, your BioWare games, Mass Effect, and Dragon Age, and also your Bethesda Studios, which I might be mispronouncing it. It's named after the city of Maryland. But like your Skyrim do this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to screen share now, and I'll pull up this sample from a student whose thesis was on a video game, and you can take a quick look at that. We're going to get a little bit of recursive, screen within a screen here as I change over. So here is what a kind of branching web can look like. I said somewhere in the instructions that branching dialogue often looks like a diamond shape. It can also look more like a spider's web, the way this one does.
That one looks like a headache.
and things like this looks terrible. This looks impossible to figure out if you're looking at it right now. But it's not actually as hard to create as it looks. Oops, wrong way. So every Twine has to have a start passage. If you change the name of your start passage, you will break. You'll break Twine's ability to turn it into a playable HTML file, which you do using the build menu. You can build a story to create an HTML file, or you can test play to test from the beginning or from a particular passage you've selected. Let me go ahead and fix that as the start passage. Oh, there isn't a title passage included in this one, is there? I'll just the story title and story author passages work like the start passage. They have the names of those passages are very specific and important. If you want your Twine to have a title, the title of a passage be story title, and then the title of the game has to go in the body of the passage. So I just gave this story a title. Now we're going to do a test play. Can everyone see this browser window?
Yes.
Okay. So here we have a fairly typical. Well, okay. What's atypical about this seen right here is that we have things like I want to go to the first floor, and then if you click it, you end up going to the first floor of the ship. You're on a space. Well, you're on something called an Ark, which is a futuristic vessel designed to preserve human life after like a nuclear war. The other thing that's atypical about this is you see the large number of options. This is a branch point. This is a branch point as it appears when you have built your Twine into HTML. It's now playable. You can visit the drone shop and then turn around and leave. That leads to an ending. Oops. Right here, this is a branch point as it appears when written in Twine. You can see that the formatting in Twine looks very much, in fact, nearly identically, except for the special characters, like it will appear as HTML. That's very much intentional in terms of design of Twine. It's part of what Twine does to try and make its own design, or with the designers of designers of Twine. It started as a one-man project, but now there's a team. It's an open-source project. Have done in order to make Twine as accessible as possible to people with no programming experience. This is a branch point because there's a choice for the player to make. Right here. It's relatively atypical in terms of expectations for the assignment in this class because there are 5 options here. That's part of why this particular Twine looks like this. It's really complicated because most of the passages are branch points, almost all of them, and most of them have 3, 4, 5 options. You include 2 options in a passage, and it's a branch point. So again, one of these boxes is a passage. Any of these passages, if there are at least 2 options that go different places, is a branch point. When I look at assignment 3, I want to see some branch points that have more than 2 options. But if most of your branch points are choices between 2 different options, that's fine. You're good. You don't have to have this kind of headache-inducing spider web. Over here, you can see a passage that's different. This is an ending passage. Any passage that has no links that go out will appear in Twine with a darker blue heading and is, for our purposes, an ending. Note that here they've all been named done. Done drone, done combat drone, and you also don't have to create a sensor drone. Now, one place where there's one thing that's important. A built Twine game is an HTML file, like we're looking at right here. If we go to the second floor, because we're in an HTML file in a web browser, I can hit the back button and go back. That's a matter of the fact that Twine builds games as HTML. And if you're looking at building Twine games for people who are into Twine, and there's a vibrant but pretty much completely non-profit community of people who write Twine games. Twine's very accessible. People create Twine games quickly, and they do so for the feedback of other people for the most part, rather than trying to sell them. Now, we're using Twine as a way to model, because it's very similar to branching dialogue and narrative branching in games of all sorts. In most video games, you know that you either can or can't go back, as opposed to it always being an option. This is, what is a sentinel? Well, in a game, you might ask Breaker, BCR, that's the robot who's helping you in this Twine, what a sentinel is, and that option might disappear from your options in a dialogue because you've already found that out. In Twine, when you're using it for this class, if there's a link back, if they're going to go back to where you were before, write it as an express link. So it would be a link down here, like, wait, I have more questions. And then we go back. Using the back button in the browser is not part of the assignment here. Please, for the purposes of thinking about how players can navigate your dialogue, do not treat the browser's back button as if it were part of the diegetic world of the story. Does that make sense? It's a bit cryptic, I know. Or
Makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to turn screen share off for now. Whoops, I just turned it back on. There we go. At this point, do any of you who are here have questions about Twine or about branching dialogue? Okay, I'm going to check and see if anyone's posted any questions in the Google Hangout set, in the viewing page, and it looks like,
make it.
yeah. Okay, it doesn't look anyone there has posted questions. So,
well, as far as the completed branch box, when you had done as the title, that's what automatically turned it black, made the box turn black, and basically ended the story from there because you put done in the title.
Okay. No. To create an ending passage, you don't have to put done in the title. That's unlike start. Your first passage has to be titled start with nothing else in the title. You can create an ending by just having a passage that doesn't have any links in it. No links anywhere else. It's a dead end. It's an ending. You tell the player that it's an ending by writing something like the end in the body of the passage. So you don't just have to use the end, but if you want to be clear to me, make sure that you let me know. You can always write whatever the last part of the dialogue is, and then type the end at the very end of that passage in order to show that you are intentionally ending the dialogue and your work there, as opposed to basically it being a passage that should logically go somewhere else, or that you had intended to build off of but didn't get around to.
I need to get my computer charger. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you say the end, that was necessary or just optional?
It is optional. It is not necessary. If the content of your passage tells me that that's where the conversation's ending, if it makes sense as an ending point, then you don't need to actually write the end.
Okay.
If there's any way it might be unclear, then go ahead and write the end. In any case, I will still be judging the work on completeness and clarity, so even if you write the end, if it doesn't really gel as a complete conversation, you'd lose points for that.
Right.
And as the assignment states, you can have up to 3 distinct endings. I don't want more than 3 because it's really easy once you start getting into writing a lot of endings to have a conversation that goes in a lot of different places and then just ends, and that is untidy. In many cases, if you have a bunch of different places a conversation goes, but they all cover the same basic things, it's not hard at all to link them back up into a common ending. If you do that in a forced way, like a conversation that either turns into the beginning of a fight or becomes a conversation about trees and the internal structures of leaves, and then you link those two back into a common ending without any kind of logical consequence of those two different paths, that's poor writing. So you want to have between 1 and 3 endings total, and they should all make sense. But if you've got a couple different ways your conversation's going, such it looks like you might have more than 3 endings, take a look at where the conversation is going again. You can probably converge those threads back together into a common ending. That's what I mean by convergence when you see that in the lessons and in the video for this week. It's bringing it back together so that the player has their chance to make some decisions, to get different information. In a video game, sometimes this has game system consequences, like additional quests or increased reputation or friendship ratings with different characters. Sometimes the reward for the player is just getting to see different ways the conversation plays out. That's something that actually matters to players. And so that's all you have to do here. I'm not asking you for this assignment to think of game system. Now, if your thesis is a video game, thinking about what game system could be is a good idea. But if you're not working on a video game for your thesis, don't sweat whether you need to earn reputation points or keeping track of variables or any of that stuff. The goal here is to write the conversation itself. Okay, thoughts or questions at this point?
So was the first assignment, that was basically the introduction and getting us used to it and just doing whatever, and now this is going more into this is what Twine is, branching dialogue, and so using it in this type of format?
Pretty much, yeah. The first assignment, I wanted to see, among other things, it's not just anything, but the first assignment is more wide open, and in terms of what's strictly required is simpler, because I want to get people going using Twine. This assignment is about using Twine to craft functional branching dialogue, because most branching dialogue for video games or commercial games is not done in Twine, but it is mostly done using tools that are similar to Twine in terms of the way they structure information. Sometimes branching dialogue is written in a spreadsheet, which is actually a terrible way to think of branching dialogue, but is convenient for programmers who enter it into code. Increasingly more often, branching dialogue is crafted using a branching dialogue editor built into a video game design suite, like Unreal or Unity. Those editors work in a way that is very similar to the way Twine works. They're just more specialized. Twine isn't only for branching dialogue, but it's a very good way to look at how branching dialogue gets put together.
Gotcha. Okay. It's like a big access database, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Like an access program.
Well, and I've had students tell me in the past that after completing the games class, and this is people for whom games are not a major interest, they used Twine afterwards as concept mapping software. There's other concept mapping software out there, but it's once you're used to Twine, if you want to use it to kind of link some thoughts together, or use it to test out plot lines or conversations that they were thinking about or unsure about in their stories. And if it's helpful for you in that way, use it. Some other people have said that they just really hated having to enter the extra characters that make the links. That's really not much in the way of programming, but it's still uncomfortably much for some people. I like Twine, including I like the fact that it's open source, so you can use it any way you want to without owing anyone a penny. Which means if you do something with Twine and want to make it part of your website, your professional website, you can do so. If you create something in Twine you think you can actually sell, you can do so. It's yours to use any way you want to. Some of the other options I've been looking at are more restricted in terms of how you can use them or who owns them, and thus, for any commercial purpose, who you would then owe money to if you use them. At the same time, I still occasionally have people who have huge problems getting Twine set up, and the occasional finickiness of the software is frustrating because that gets in the way of teaching the techniques that the class is actually about. Anyone had any problems with Twine as software recently? Sorry, I think Antoine, were you about to say something?
No, no, I was figured you was referring to the advanced techniques. We were talking
Mhm.
about complexities. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to hear a bit more about that?
I did try to mess around with it a little bit, but yeah, that got me lost as soon as I started trying to mess around with it, though. Yeah.
It, it's a
Yeah.
good it's a good thing to come back to later. For one thing, you can completely customize the way Twine works using cascading style sheets. That's another kind of special passage in Twine. And here's the thing about cascading style sheets, or CSS. CSS is the way that every original, good-looking website is organized or is visually designed today. CSS is a core part of website design, and you can do some things with CSS and Twine just by looking up specific things you want to do, like change what the font is. But if you get into it a bit more, not only are you learning how to make Twine look any way you want to, that is the built HTML files, the playable files, you are also teaching yourself CSS, which will be useful for any website you ever design or modify. And similarly, there's a programming language underneath the hood of Twine called Twee. Twee is what you don't see when you're looking at all those boxes. Twee is all code. If you ever want to get into Twee and take a look around, it's similar to some of the XML that games writers sometimes have to kind of patch their dialogues and descriptions into. Games writers sometimes have to go into script files, XML scripting. It's not hardcore coding, and manually put their dialogue into the blanks. And if you can do that, that's a leg up. And so Twine is a really good kind of teaching tool for a lot of things, including how you can be just a little bit more tech and web savvy while keeping your focus on your writing. This is one of the reasons why I haven't yet introduced, I keep debating this, a full game design suite like Unity, because those setups get very technical very quickly, and frankly, it would be preposterous to think that you could master. It would be much more confusion and trouble than it's worth in the course of a program where your goal is not to become a video game programmer or a 3D artist, but a writer. So, other questions at this point?
Well, how does understanding programming in that sense, things like Unity, if you were to teach it, how do you think that would influence our writing?
Well, it would do two things. First, engaging with any kind of coding or scripting, even if it's through at a relative remove through a graphical interface, puts you in touch with the mindset in which programming takes place, and it's one of absolute meanings. As creative writers, almost everything we do is about contextual meaning, about nuance, about metaphor, about layering. In coding, it's all direct logical statements, and everything is arranged to have one singular meaning. A simple example using Twine. If you want to create a variable in Twine, you don't use equals to both set the value of that variable, and to check it. You use is to set the variable equal to what you want it to be, and then you use the equal sign in a logical statement to check and see if it's equal to something. Mind you, some programming languages are smart enough that they can, in many contexts, determine what an equal sign means by how you're using it. But or is it actually all that many? I'm too rusty on my programming to remember. But anyway, so yes, Michael, I used. That was some pretty good advanced twine use. It really was. I was impressed, even with the flaws.
I had a hard time with it, figuring out how to do that, by the way.
I'm sorry. What did you say? I'm getting fuzzy-headed.
So it took a while to figure out how to do what I did on that twine.
Oh, but at least I hope it was a valuable experience.
Yeah.
The thing that really helped me was actually one of your previous Hangouts, I think. I just kind of followed step by step.
That's something that's why I do these as Hangouts on air, so the archives are available. I'm also... I've got a couple of... let's see, that's only the one at the moment. There's only one that's actually available, that's a short intro. I want to replace that one massive Hangout that there's a link to when you first start up with Twine with a number of shorter, much more to the point videos, and then have a list of all of them that tutorialize different parts, including more of the advanced aspects of Twine. It's just one of those projects that keeps getting pushed off because I have other things I have to do.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that the other Hangouts helped you, Miles. So, let's see. It's now about 20 to 11. I figure we'll head toward wrapping up, but want to do two things first, and the first one was see if there's any of you had any more questions. And we also check one more time to see if there are any questions from the home audience. Doesn't seem to be. Excuse me as I'm losing my voice. And then also open it up to more casual questions, just basically, or thoughts. Like, I would love to know if any of you have any time for gaming, what you're playing right now. So first, any serious questions? Any more on-point stuff?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. So, do any of you have video games that you are playing through at present?
Star Wars: The Old Republic. Yeah, a lot of branching dialogue in that.
Yeah. That game is actually going to become a part of this program. It actually is something I was working on. There are two games that are going to become permanent parts of the program. One is Star Wars, and the other one, for a very different style of storytelling in games, and something that's a little less intimidating up front for people who don't play as much, is Gone Home. I don't know if you've played Gone Home. Really interesting, totally story-driven game. Some people have called it, not a game because there's really no way to lose. You explore and you discover parts of the story. But very atmospheric and a family drama, which is the kind of thing you don't see that often in games. But I think it's more effective as a game where you explore your family's home after you come home from college and no one's there. And as you explore the house, you start to find out about things that have been going on and something that went wrong. So, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, it's a classic. In fact, it's really where BioWare started doing the kind of games that have it was BioWare's breakthrough game, is what I would say. And it is set thousands of years before any of the Star Wars movies, was released before any of the prequels, and by the accounts of most players is much more worthy of being considered one of the classic Star Wars stories than the Star Wars prequels are. In it, you play as, and this is a video gaming cliche, but it's one that is valuable enough in many cases to become a worthwhile trope. Someone who has gaps in their memory. Amnesia, perhaps. and then you start discovering as you're on a quest. You could consider it, a quest in the kind of hero's journey sense. It's got a lot of those elements. That you've got some connection to the Force, and then that takes the game in a whole other direction. I don't think I gave any spoilers away there, did I?
No.
If anything, I was probably too vague. But if you want a game that has a lot of branching dialogue, it was one of the first games to have large amounts. Binder, it was 10,000 pages, something, when printed out, which can be deceptive because of the way the formatting works. But still, it was a huge amount of branching dialogue. And there are now games that have had 5-10 times that much. Knights of the Old Republic, sometimes referred to affectionately as KOTOR, for the acronym for Knights of the Old Republic, is a classic. What have I been playing? Go ahead.
The Walking Dead. Is that like
Walking Dead?
Yeah.
The Walking Dead is a great game from a story perspective. It's all focused on the Telltale games, Walking Dead games, right? Is it because it's all focused on making meaningful decisions. There's a lot of narrative branches. Some of them are not branches in dialogue. They're decisions you make about what happened, where you go, or what you do next. And you make decisions that have real consequences, even as you also move toward some kind of, I dare say, cinematically plotted reveals and major turning points. Telltale Games is they do a fair amount of licensed games like the Walking Dead games, but they do them with more care and more of a desire to really create an impressive gameplay experience than many of the companies that do licensed games. And they're a smaller company to begin with. What was it? Some of their earliest stuff was really kind of very indie, very experimental. Samorost, I think, is a Telltale game. If it's not, then I'm getting my wires crossed and I'm thinking of some other company. But Antoine, have you been playing The Walking Dead? I didn't mean to just kind of jump in there and.
No, yeah, I did try it out. I tried it out, and I noticed the dialogue and the choices made for each decision kind of seemed like Twine. I guess I rented it around the same time we started doing Twine, so I was wondering about that.
Yeah. Telltale Games, the makers of the Walking Dead games, they don't do their design in Twine. They have their own proprietary in-house tools, but their game design, if you mapped it out, if you drew it or used, as some people in the games industry used to do, and in some cases still do, a giant sheet of butcher paper to map out all the decisions, it would look just like a Twine game.
That's kind of how I came up with my game for the first time. Okay. All right.
So, I haven't had a lot of gaming time lately myself, but I have been playing a bit of Mines of Mars, which is a game that takes kind of the Minecraft or Terraria model. Those are games that are pretty much pure play. There's almost no story. And strips out some of the complexities. You are a miner whose ship. You're an interstellar miner in Earth in the centuries in the future, and something goes wrong with your ship, and you wind up on Mars, or I think actually there's something that goes wrong along the way, and you mine further into Mars and start discovering life underneath the surface, and start spreading as you encounter it. Some of it's hostile. Some of it's completely benign. And the thing is, it takes a genre known for games that are very gameplay intensive, very sandboxy, open world, but almost completely free of story. And then it adds a story onto it as you start discovering these ancient ruins from a society that inhabited Mars who knows how many centuries or millennia ago. I'm still trying to decide if it actually is really a good fusion, because you end up having to do a lot of, you might say, work to get your story. if you want the story, there's a bit of like, okay, I have to go and mine and see if I can find any emeralds because I really need them to go to the next ruin and actually survive it. And that's one of those tensions that can exist in games. I think that games that are both high story and high gameplay can be very successful. And I think, actually, Knights of the Old Republic's a good example of that. But there can be a tension because some players will just want to do the things that make them successful within the game and to kind of build up that way. It's a pity that Antonio Washington isn't here because his post about kind of achievement-oriented gamers as opposed to story-oriented gamers was really interesting. Perhaps a little bit showing personal bias towards story, but I have a similar bias. So, but sometimes games that have a lot of gameplay that can cause you to spend countless hours in between story sections, that can dilute the story, and if you want the story first, that can be frustrating. It all depends in part on the gamer, the audience as well. No.
Makes sense.
Anyone have any thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up.
I'm good.
Okay. I will. Someone said something, so I want to make sure I don't cut anyone off.
I was just going to say I'm definitely enjoying the class, even though I'm not much of a modern gamer. But the newest system I was really involved in was the N64. So.
Good system.
Classic. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I still. I mean, I almost never actually boot it up, but I still look for Super Nintendo and Genesis emulators on any new computer I get because it just makes me feel better to have some of those games around.
Yep.
And well, I hope this was a success for all of you. I certainly was hard enough to get here, but I think we've ironed out most of the problems with the Hangout to this point. There will be another one next week. It's optional for the entire class. It is going to kind of try to offer people a chance to kind of wrap up thoughts on games. It's going to be I'm hoping to see, I'd like to see, it may be impossible, if I can get everyone who's working on a video game for their thesis into that Hangout. And I also, especially if not all the video games thesis folks can make it, will carve out some time in that Hangout to talk about comic books, which is after, well, I can't even say after, alongside of video games. Comics are my other great love as a medium. So I'm going to go ahead and end this here. I'll post the link to the video archive to the entire class as soon as it's available. If any of you have further questions, please ask. You can contact me, email, over the platform. And I'm also available by phone, though it's often best to make an appointment with me for that.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, good night. I'm ending the broadcast.
Later,
We're out.
All right.